Hello everybody, my name is Christy Spicer and today I'm going to be presenting a discussion on culture, gender, age specific to the Arab culture. Outline and objectives for this is we're going to give a general overview of the Arab culture, any historical heritage that's important to the culture, cultural competence and compliance, discuss specific characteristics within the Arab culture itself, using Purnell's culture model. We will be presenting viewpoints from someone within the culture that I have had a chance and opportunity to interview, give specific nursing implications for some of the characteristics, and look at a nursing research article as it relates to the Arab culture. We'll start off with just explaining about standards and compliance issues. With that, we have to look at beliefs, practices, and languages and make occurrences for those within our practice. Specifically, what we look at is national standards on culturally and linguistically appropriate services, which is mandated through the Department of Health and Human Services, and it basically states healthcare organizations should ensure that patients, consumers, receive from all staff members effective, understandable, and respectful care that is provided in a manner compatible with their cultural health beliefs, practices, and their preferred language. We have to make interpreters, sign language, or otherwise available to them if they request it or if they are having problems understanding us. Culturally importance is basically where the nurse is able to build and open up a relationship with the client where there's mutual trust, prevents us from making errors on judgments, prevents us from taking our biases and putting them into practice, opens up a dialogue for communication because of the trust, allows us to involve them in their plan of care by using what they hold dear to them in their culture, and it also usually can end up having us recognize with them certain traits and beliefs that we all do have in common. And like I mentioned before in the objectives and the outline, we will be using the Purnell model. What this is it's basically a framework that we use to ensure that we are being culturally competent. The outer ring is the global society, which is everything outside of this. Next, you have community. The inner circle into that is the family, and then last is the person. And the Purnell model is very good with using all the spokes in the middle. If you notice, it kind of looks like a demonstration of a wheel, and they are all domains of culture, which we're all going to use all 12 of those when discussing the Arab culture specifically today. To jump right in, basic overview, historical heritage, things that we need to know about the Arab culture is there's actually 22 Arab countries throughout the world. Arabic is their dominant language. 60% of all the oral reserves in the world reside in Arab countries. There are over 200 million Arabs worldwide. Value is strongly placed on the family, clan, and tribe. They try at all extents to avoid shame, and honor is the utmost importance. The Arab worldview is based upon 6 concepts. We won't go specifically into each one of those, but to name them, it's called atomism. They look at faith. They use wish versus reality, importance of justice and equality, family over self, and they do have a paranoia towards Western cultures and views, which you will see explained in more detail as we go throughout this. When it comes to communication specifically, they do place a lot of emphasis on verbal language. That is their preferred means. They believe that words have power. They also consider any written words or any written language to be holy because that's how they view the Quran, which we'll talk about later when we get down to spirituality. They like to avoid any negative speech, unpleasant talk. Gestures all have symbolic measures, and it is seen as an unspoken language. Something as simple that we use here in the Western culture, such as the OK sign, actually has an offensive meaning over to the Arab culture. And another thing is they believe that you have to make and maintain eye contact when you're speaking with someone. If not, it's shown as a sign of disrespect or disinterest. Moving on down to concept of time, their time frame is very much different from ours here. They move at a much slower pace. They have less rigidity in their scheduling. So if you are working in the healthcare field, this may be expressed as like tardiness to appointments or not holding to the same scheduling type issues that we usually have to maintain when you're in the healthcare field. They also consider it rude if you're with them to glance down or look at your watch or to look at the wall for the time. Family roles and organizations, as I mentioned, with their within their value system, family is of the utmost importance. They place more emphasis on the family than they do over individuality. They come from large families because a large family benefits the entire group economically. They have a collective mentality over individuality. Family reputation is very important. You cannot do anything to bring shame or dishonor on your family. The males is the authority, the oldest male having the utmost control, and women have to have a subordinate role in that. They are very private in their family matters, and as we'll see later, and oftentimes sometimes health issues that they face. There's also a division of male and females. Not only will they not usually eat together in the home, some of them will have separate rooms for socializing. And sons are often favored, well, not often, always favored over daughters. Once a daughter is married and they expect all Arabs to marry, the females are actually blended into their husband's family, so leaving their family. Spirituality, there are many religions that reside within the Arab culture, but for the sake of time, what we'll do is we'll just consider Islam, which is Muslim. With spirituality, there's many actual religions within the Arab culture, but for the sake of time, we're only going to discuss the faith of Islam. People who are followers of Islam are known as Muslim, and they use the Quran, which is the equivalent to our Bible. Weak faith is believed to lead to illness, sickness, and death. If God wants to heal you, He will. If He wants to give you disease, He will. Friday is actually their holy day, and that day is considered sacred, so it's the equivalent of what we would practice here on Sundays. Everything in the Islamic Muslim faith revolves around the lunar calendar and the lunar cycle. They use 353 or 354 days a year, so there's also less days in their calendar than ours. They have call to prayer 5 times a day at very specific times, and it's very ritualistic in behavior. They have certain things that they must do, and cleaning themselves and washing in a certain ritualistic fashion is required before each, and it signifies purification. Workforce issues, leading right in from that, because their holy day is on Fridays, they actually look at their work week as being starting on Saturday. So their weekends are usually considered to be Thursdays and Fridays. So as an employee or an employer, that has to be taken into consideration. And all work must come to a complete stop during these 5 times of prayer. So if you're the employer or if you're providing care to them, whatever you're doing, you're supposed to stop and give them time so that they can have their faith. Continuing on, when we talk about biocultural ecology, there is actually some very unique differences within the Arab culture. They are known to have a glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. They also have a very high rate of consanguinity marriages, which is basically interracial, and not interracial, but interfamily mingling. It is very common for first cousins to marry, and this usually occurs in 25% of all Arab marriages. They look at it as keeping their clan or their tribe pure, but research has shown it does lead to a higher rate of incidence in metabolic disorders and autosomal recessive disorders. Some of that they contribute to familial marriage, and some is related to Arab women having children much later in life. because they so desire big families. When we look at healthcare practices within the Arab culture, excuse me, they do have very good hand hygiene, very good personal hygiene, and all of that comes from the Quran. It's basically their manual, and they're instructed how to wash, how to clean their hands before meals, and other information about that. God decides who's ill, who has disease, so they mainly rely on God to heal them. They have a fatalistic attitude. If they believe that they have cancer, then that's the will of God. If it's the will of God for them to be healed, they will. They usually will wear a talisman or some sort of like a good luck charm. Some of it will have verses, sayings on it, but they all have things that are important to them that they cling to. They believe that exposure to cold or to dampness can also be a cause of illness. So if you're caring for them, make sure that they're wrapped up, that they have warm blankets, and they like to wear their more layers of clothing. A fuller figure is seen as healthy, whereas in their society, being thin is a sign of illness or poorness. They also do believe in medicine, and if they do seek out medical treatment from Western medicine, they do expect to receive some sort of an actual pill or a treatment to make them better. With healthcare practitioners, they usually have a person that's called an imam, which is their central figure. It would be the equivalent of what you would see in the hospital as the hospital chaplain. They are considered to be their cultural broker or their translator. They are kind of a go-between between the healthcare personnel and the family and the patient. They act to make sure that healthcare messages are getting across, that cultural things are being observed where appropriate, and they provide support and counseling to the patient and family as well. In the healthcare setting, a female has to care for another female, and a male has to care for a male. Male physicians, male nurses, male techs, anything like that, they typically do not even want them in the room, especially if it's their wife or their mother. There's usually a male figure that will come to the hospital with the female. As we'll talk about later when we get to meet the client that I interviewed, there are some differences like that come out. So biases and assumptions, again, are important. They want to provide modesty, coverings during exams, or not to be completely uncovered at any time. We also need to reserve the right that they need to be able to reserve their religious things like Ramadan and have their specific foods. And they need to have prayer time added into their plan of care and treatments. Nutrition is very important. They do have staples in their diet, such as lamb, dark pita bread. They are forbidden from drinking any type of alcohol or eating any form of pork. Other than lamb, any other meat that they do eat has to be butchered in a very specific manner. Eating, drinking, any tasks at all has to be conducted only with their right hand. The left hand is considered to be unclean. Leaving food on their plate, though, is considered normal. It's a sign of respect, so don't expect them to clean their plates at mealtime. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Ramadan during the holy month is during this time. They will fast from daylight till dark and then eat a big meal at night. So you have to consider medication administration and nutrition during illness to take that into consideration. With prevalence of disease, there really wasn't much on this due to the fact that there's not a lot of research studies specific to Arab culture. Some of that is due to their culture, where they don't want to display information that they see as private. The only information that I was able to find was actually a research article, and it was done at the University of Michigan, and they looked at were Arab mortality rates lower than other cultures. Men that were Arab had stroke and diabetes that was lower than whites and blacks. Heart disease was higher in Arab men, and cancer was equal to the other ethnic groups. When they looked at the women and their mortality rate, regardless of their age groups, all of the diseases combined that I had mentioned about men were all lowered in Arab women than among any of the other cultures. One thing that they have taken into consideration with this specific study is the longer that they're here